Dear future Enoch, winter has come early and it is cold outside. Still, that didn't stop me from bringing my camera and my massive telephoto lens to meet the non-migratory birds. This lens totally wasn't my dad's. Anyways, the other day I was at my church fellowship and we did a group activity where we had to do the Likeable Person test. Now, I personally hate tests like these because they try to explain the complexities of a human being in quantitative terms. And you've probably encountered these tests at least once in your life. Like tests that evaluate whether you're a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learner. Or tests that calculate your political alignment. Or how sociable you are. Or even how likely you are to commit crimes. The problem is that you can't possibly know someone based on a questionnaire of 20 questions because people are far more complex than a quantitative test calculated with a formula that may or may not be public and possibly describe, and you can't shoehorn people into rigid categories. Anyways, I scored 70% on the test, which makes me a likable person. I guess that's nice. Though some of the facets it ranked me on are unusual, to say the least, and inaccurate at worst. Happiness seems accurate. I'm pretty content and satisfied with myself. It thinks I'm much kinder than I actually am. I feel like I'm more of a pessimist. Tolerance is something I'm actively trying to work on. I want to be more patient, I want to listen more attentively without becoming disinterested or brushing off what people have to say. Honesty is a virtue for me, even if it hurts. Friendliness? Really? I feel like I need to work on friendliness. Humor is definitely inaccurate, as I've been described as a humorous person by many people. But to be frank, the test had like 2 questions on humor. See the problem with these tests? This test may very well quantitatively say that I am a likable person, but you won't know for sure until you actually get to know me. And you can't know me until you spend time with me and see me as a human being, rather than the results of a test. I don't think tests like these are completely useless. They can be a conversation starter, albeit a pretty odd one. And they are an attempt in describing something complex in simpler terms. But they are far from accurate, and they should never replace getting to know people by spending time with them, doing things with them, having meaningful conversations with them. You know, doing human things with other humans. And we need to be careful not to use the results of these tests to categorize other people, or even ourselves, and end up dividing people into vague, poorly defined groups that often don't fully describe each individual member. For example, the learning mode tests. The what type of a learner are you tests. When I was a kid, I was classified as a visual learner and a kinesthetic learner by 2 different tests. Which one was correct? Well, I learn by doing things, so I'm a kinesthetic learner. But I typically need to see an example of it being done, so I'm a visual learner too. And having someone explain it to me verbally adds a personal element to the process, so it becomes easier to remember. So I'm an auditory learner too. So both tests were right. And wrong at the same time. I use all 3 modes of learning, and I think most of us unconsciously do. And the effectiveness of learning modes differs depending on the subject being taught. The thought that the results of 2 different tests could convince teachers to either only show me cue cards or make me get out of my seat for everything is not comforting. Human beings are more complicated in a way that a graded test can never explain. And there's another aspect I dislike about these tests. Most of them rely on the participant answering questions honestly. And it's super easy to let unconscious personal bias creep in. Like recency bias. I mean, earlier that morning, after I was done photographing birds, I went to Starbucks. And the guy in front of me was rude and condescending to the barista. So when it was my turn, I tipped the barista extra for the troubles. Later, when I was doing the test, I was asked questions about whether I would be kind and generous to other people, and that event came to mind, because it was recent. I probably would have answered the question differently if I had done the test a week later. Generous one week, stingy the next. Don't let a test define you. And don't let a test determine how you define others. Future Enoch, I'll see you next week.